Make sure my handy dandy helps to turn it on. Works. There we go. Okay, thank you everyone for coming this evening. I appreciate you all waiting for 7 o'clock to come around. We're still tweaking our format. Last time we had 2 presentations and that didn't quite work because we had a group that came in the beginning and then the group that came for the middle was out of sorts. So we thought, okay, we'll have a drop-in session to start and then the presentation, but we had such an eager group that I think you all were hoping we would start a little sooner than 7. So I apologize for those who were waiting, but thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. My name is John Grieve. I'm the Deputy Project Manager from Parsons on this assignment. Parsons has been hired by the City of Oshawa to undertake this study. And so tonight we're at Public Open House or Public Information Center number 2. And really what we want to do today is talk to you about what we've done and what we've seen so far in the project, as well as present to you the 3 land use alternatives that we've come up with, as well as some other associated project material. So my presentation will be about 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes if I talk on as I'm known to. But I promise you, as soon as I'm done the rest of the evening, we're here right through 8:45 and we'll stay even longer if we have to, but scheduled for 8:45. So a good hour of the rest of the evening will be for question and answers. Listen to you, have questions. We're here to hear them and answer them the best we can. So what I want to present today, very similar to what you saw on the boards that you've read, but I want to go through it in a little bit more detail, give you a little bit more background. So give you a study overview, timeline of the project that we're doing, highlight our consultation results from stage 1, what we heard. A number of you, I think, were in the room in February when we did our first open house. So we want to present to you a little bit of what we heard, what were the main themes. Then, sorry.
For an interjection, maybe if we do a few introductions, like just so we get them.
Absolutely. My apologies, Tom. I'm so weak. I had so many eyeballs staring at me. I felt I had to get going. My apologies. We do have a number of representatives from the city here this evening. I'll let you introduce yourselves. Tom, why don't you go first?
Thanks, everyone. I'm Tom Goody. I'm the Director of Planning Services here with the city.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Ranjit Gill. I'm the Manager of Professional Services with Engineering Services branch.
Everyone, I'm Carl Airbauer. I'm the Senior Planner, City of Oshawa, Policy.
I'm Megan Harrington, Manager of Policy and Planning Services.
Thank you. My apologies. I was eager, and my apologies to my team that are here as well. I've got a couple of other sets of eyes staring at me. Marianne, why don't you?
Hiding behind here, Marianne Alden. I'm the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Lead and Consultation Lead from Parsons.
And I'm Stephanie Magnanelli. I'm the Integrated Mobility Planner at Parsons.
Thank you. And then Audrey at the back of the room, you would have all met at the sign-in table.
Audrey Thibault, and I'm an urban design intern at Setting and Design.
So yeah, so too is our land use planner that partnered with Parsons on this assignment. Unfortunately, their senior staff member who would have been here tonight and would have taken half the presentation that I gave came down with a serious bout of heat stroke, and it was actually advised by his doctor not to drive, which was interesting. So fortunately, you have me for the whole presentation. I will try to make it enjoyable, and if it's really bad, just tell me. I won't be offended. So, sorry. Yes.
I think we also have Councillor John Gray in the audience. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend, Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, sorry, where was I? Present the results of stage 1, give you a little bit of an idea of the key themes we heard. Then we'll move on to the land use alternatives, present to you and discuss about how we came up with those alternatives. We then want to present or give you some thought around the urban design plan or the guidelines on how we feel these alternatives, or the ones we pick the preferred alternative, how it could be implemented, some of those key principles. Talk about the evaluation criteria. So how are we actually going to assess and pick a preferred? That is what our next step of the process is to come up with a single alternative that we define as the preferred alternative. Skipped over it actually. So transportation analysis. So we've done some analysis around the alternatives. We want to give you a feel of what we're seeing there. And then we'll go on to next steps. And as I say, the question and answer period. So study overview. So many of you I think are already well aware of this project, but the purpose of this integrated major transit station area study is to advance the development or redevelopment of the study area and support and accommodate the future Central Oshawa GO station. The study, as a study or as a core principle of the project, we want to ensure that we meet future density targets, that we integrate well with the surrounding neighborhoods, that we have a sense and respect the existing urban fabric. We promote active transportation and enhance safety for vulnerable road users, and that we emphasize sustainability and protect the natural environment and the existing features that are within the study area. So what are the major deliverables, or what are the outcomes of this study? Mainly, it is a master land use plan and urban design plan. So that is the document that would support the land use alternative, that colorful map of land use permissions. It would be the documentation around that. And then subsequently, or in conjunction with, we're creating an area specific master plan, which will take place or work through the first 4 phases of the municipal class environmental assessment for any infrastructure that is identified as needed to support those or support the land use alternative. So where are we in the study? We're in stage 2. We're near the end of stage 2. That's where we're presenting these land use alternatives, gathering feedback before we go through and complete the evaluation and select a preferred alternative. In stage 3, that is where we select that alternative and do supporting studies or supporting work before moving into stage 4, finalizing the study and ultimately presenting it to council in the summer or just before summer next year. So what's the purpose of this evening? I've already sort of gone over it, but again, we want to present the alternatives, talk about our evaluation criteria, the content or the concepts of our urban design plan and implementation guidelines, highlight the the transportation analysis that we've done on those land use alternatives, and then highlight again key study dates. So the objectives, we want to hear from you, hear your opinions of this. Tonight is not the only opportunity. I think all of you or many of you have the survey that we have. For those who don't have or didn't get a hard copy, or if your neighbors want a copy, it is posted online. We do have a study website. Encourage you to go there. There's actually on the thank you board just here where you exit, there's a QR code. You scan that, it takes you right to it. It's really easy, really handy. We also have it at the end of the presentation as well. So what were the results? What did we hear in stage 1 of the consultation process? And really, the comments we heard can be summarized or broken down into 4 major groups. They were safety, community enhancements, active transportation, and residential and commercial density. From a safety perspective, we heard that there was a desire or a need to prioritize pedestrian and cyclist safety. We're not surprised that that is a priority and should be a priority of all development. That is something that needs to be done. There was a general sense of a desire to improve safety throughout the M.T.S.A. and a number of comments around reducing speed limits. Again, something we're seeing a lot in many cities and towns around the GTA and beyond, recognizing that reduced speed limits can increase safety and do increase safety, particularly for pedestrians and vulnerable road users. On this the theme of community enhancements, or the topic, there was a desire to revitalize the area and create welcoming and vibrant streets. The desire for more green spaces and parks that are oriented to people and community spaces. They want, again, enhancing those spaces. So what is there? Enhance the existing green spaces. There is many elements of Oshawa's history within this M.T.S.A. So a desire to recognize that and simply not simply demolish it or get rid of it, but to recognize that and incorporate it into this revitalized study area. And again, protect those historical building features as well. From an active transportation perspective, there's a desire to see an expanded built upon network, providing direct access to transit services in the area, particularly the future GO station, and a need for more reliable and frequent public transit in this area is what we were hearing. And then from a residential community density perspective, an urgent need for more housing. Definitely heard that, and really hearing that all over the GTA. But absolutely here, particularly in the low and medium rise development scale. There was a concern for going too far to the extreme and creating too many high-rise developments, so having too drastic of a change. So recognizing that and ensuring that the increased density of the area is appropriate and that it respects the established community of the area, and that it is gradual in the transitions between those areas. And then obviously a need for mixed developments that bring in not only residential uses, but all of those commercial and retail uses that support that residential development. So from the results or from the first round of public consultation, we had presented a draft problem and opportunity statement. We have since finalized it. It is posted there, and I will quickly read it. So the problem was, or identified as, that the Central Oshawa M.T.S.A. encompasses the planned Central Oshawa GO station along the future Lakeshore East Rail Service extension. It is located south of downtown Oshawa in an area in transition. The M.T.S.A. possesses many parcels of land which are underdeveloped and underutilized. The transportation network in the M.T.S.A. is oriented to automobile users and is disconnected for users of all other forms of transportation. So that was the problem that we saw and what we heard from residents like yourselves. And so the opportunity we defined as, in order to support the future GO rail service extension and the planned Central Oshawa GO station, along with the population employment density targets for the M.T.S.A. as directed by the province, the Integrated M.T.S.A. study must develop the necessary land use, urban design, and transportation plans that will support and guide the growth and redevelopment of the M.T.S.A. And so then from those problem and opportunity statements, we have our visions and our guiding principles. And very quickly, the vision is to be industry leading, sustainable, have a context sensitive built form, as I say, recognizing that this is an existing community, often, particularly along GO rail extensions, they're in greenfield developments or greenfield areas. This is not the case here. There's an existing community here, and we need to have a context sensitive built form. And then it needs to have that comprehensive, accessible and multimodal transportation system supporting it. We want to reduce the auto dependency and support a variety of mode options in the study area. And as I say, protect the heritage and natural assets of the area. So the principles is to establish complete community, prioritize sustainable and livable development, cultivate a strong economy, and integrate travel equity, choice, and safety. And so then we develop, so as I say, from all of that, from those principles, from that initial assessment of this area, we have developed 3 land use alternatives. And so to get there, first of all, we wanted to highlight kind of the block form or the built form that is not only representative of the colors that we'll show on the maps here in a minute here, but also show you how that built form can take many forms, and in many cases does take many forms. So that the transformation of the M.T.S.A. will be driven by a change in urban form, including the block structure, the block types that you do see in the area. So there is going to be a larger variety of that built form in the area, but it needs to be, as I say, context sensitive And there are several options available to us to achieve those yields or those density targets. And it doesn't have to be prescribed or built in a single form factor. That's what we want to really kind of emphasize here, is that it's not one single form that will make this community thrive and reach its potential. It is that mixture of built form and density types. And so that's where you see on those kind of white shadow blocks or massing blocks, you can see under each color type. So from the light yellow on the left, the lowest density, just got my laser pointer, lightest yellow on the left, lowest density, to the purple being the highest density. You can see in these block types, you can achieve the density numbers in many different ways. And I'll use this orange one in the middle as an example. So this is talking about a kind of a mid-level density in this scale that we're looking at. But as you can see, it's achieved in many different ways, from, townhome type buildings with, a small apartment, or in another option, it's, 2 small apartment buildings. And a third option, it's a few more of these, townhomes or row housing with a slightly larger apartment building, or even as far as, the highest example, where you've got even more of that row housing or small semi-detached homes with a larger tower, but is context sensitive, that it's sitting on a podium, so it's, at scale of the roads, it's in line with those other buildings, but then has towers that go higher. So all of those in that example are densities that would fall within that color shade. And so that's just, as I say, trying to visualize and provide examples that, yes, we are applying colors to these, these parcels, and we're trying to achieve that density that works for this community. But also within those colors, there is a wide variety and a very suitable solution in those kind of at each level. And so that's something we wanted to just highlight. And again, kind of emphasizing that the opportunities exist of areas to create strategic growth while maintaining or having blocks that transition from those stable areas to areas of slow infill to the more focused density, and that these built forms will allow flexibility in that urban form. So again, what I was just speaking about. So before I get into the alternatives, I want to just paint a picture of what are we seeing today. And so today, this is the existing land use condition. And see, these are the current permissions within the area. And from a pure statistics perspective, we have about 6,500 residents in the area, about 575 jobs, which creates a density of people and jobs per hectare. You'll hear me reference that a number of times this evening, but a density of 42 people or jobs per hectare. That's what we see today. Okay, so that's our base foundation, or our starting block. This next slide is putting that first building block. So what is currently being proposed or has approval in the area? So what are developers currently trying to build in this area proposing? And what does that mean if they were to receive all their approvals from the city? And there are a number of properties here, I will say, don't have their full approvals. So it's not a guarantee that all of these will come in the form that they're proposed here, but this is what developers are thinking of for this area. And so what they think of, and you can see of the colored parcels, we're only talking about a few more than a dozen parcels of change in the neighborhood. They're proposing to bring the residential population from 6,500 up to 17,600, nearly doubling the number of jobs and bringing a people and jobs per hectare calculation up to 110. Yes.
Understand 1,000 jobs what would be the median pay rate for those jobs?
That's beyond my expertise. I don't know. Those, I don't know if city, if you would have a comment,
Coffee shop.
you would make, minimum wage, but, that.
Minimum wage jobs, but you want to incorporate 17,610 residents.
So again, this is what's being proposed by developers. And I, as the consultant hired by the city, I don't have the statistics as to what jobs those may be. Yes, I imagine the majority would be retail service-based jobs, but there is.
But this is an integrated major transit station area study. So we're talking about the being able to get around, right?
Absolutely.
It's about transit, right? So you're talking about incorporating, you're more than doubling, you're tripling the residents in the area. And you're saying that there's 1,000 jobs, and these are going to be 1,000 jobs here, but they're basically only going to be minimum wage jobs. So those 17,000 people are going to have to go somewhere to get to work, right? So the infrastructure needs to be able to support that.
Absolutely does.
So that's why I'm asking these questions.
Understood.
Okay.
And I agree with you. Absolutely.
So do any of you people live in Oshawa?
So if I may, so
But you
Yes.
didn't answer my question.
yes, I do live in
Do you live
Oshawa.
in Oshawa? Do you live 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 in Oshawa?
I don't, but sorry, ma'am, I don't, but I understand.
Question.
I understand, but you're pointing at us and asking if we live in Oshawa.
Right.
But to be an expert or to be a professional like I am, I don't need to live in the place that I work in.
But I think everybody here needs to understand that none of you people live here, except for you.
Understood, but every day of the week, I do studies like this. I've been doing studies like this for over a decade. That is my profession, is to do this study and then to have these evenings like this where, yes,
Okay.
I want to hear from you,
Okay.
local resident. What are the issues? Because I don't live in this community. I was a resident of Oshawa up till 8 months ago.
So you do these studies all the time. How
Yes.
often do you think that any of us sit through a study like this? Maybe once in our lifetimes, we
Absolutely.
might attend a meeting like this.
Absolutely.
So probably none of us have never done this before. Maybe some of you were at the one in November talking about the PPG plant, right? Okay, I was there. But, like, we don't know. We're the newbies here.
Understood.
And I am one of those people that speaks for her neighbors because they work shift work.
Understood.
Okay, so I'm here representing 4 of my neighbors, and we have a lot of questions.
Absolutely.
Because I was at that meeting in November, and I did see the infrastructure that they want to put in that 13-acre parcel of land directly across the street from my house. Okay,
Understood.
and I was there last year, living in my house last year, when they had construction on my front lawn to try and expand the water, because they had to shoot the water main under the 401. And I drive out every day on the Albert Street Bridge to where that infrastructural change that occurred to make our lives better and our water safer is still leaking. Okay,
Understood.
so I'm just wondering how you're going to incorporate another, 10,000, 11, 12,000 people in that area when they can't even get the water main to stop leaking.
I think this is good discussion. You raised absolutely valid points. I am cognizant that we do have a virtual audience as well.
Yes.
And I know that between that audience and then certainly probably people here, there may be time constraints. So certainly I would encourage perhaps those kinds of questions to be addressed during the time you set aside after the presentation, because people may have family or time commitments.
Understood. Absolutely.
So thank you.
So as I say, the idea of this slide was simply to give a picture of what is currently being proposed of the area. So absent of this study, if this study didn't exist, this is what developers are proposing to the city as what they would like to do, what they would like to develop in this area. And so those are the statistics of that. And so then we get to our land use alternatives, which are the 3 alternatives that we have this evening. And these alternatives look at the potential for this area. And I know we just talked about 17,000 being a large number, and the numbers that you'll see here are larger than that. But what I would like to emphasize is what we're presenting here are the concepts, or the discussion we're having here is land use permissions. It is of a requirement of the city to have a land use plan that lays out permissions for the area, for all of their areas that they control. And then it is then up to the development community to realize that. And so what we're looking at from a potential absorption rate for these areas, for plans like this, we believe this is in the order of more than 50 years. This is a long-term transition. This is not 10 years from now, this is what it will look like. Not possible. This is simply trying to set that foundation, that best foundation we can set to support all of the other infrastructure investment, mainly the GHOST train extension, as well as the other higher order transit that's coming to the area. That is what we're trying to understand and set, is that foundation, and then that transition will take decades. This is not a 10-year horizon. It's not what it is. And so that, I just want to make sure is clear. This is 50 years plus transition, slowly over time, as developers have opportunities, as residents choose to change their property to a higher use. And this is simply setting those permissions. So that's what we're talking about this evening. Okay. And so first alternative, what we've called around Go Station Transit Centered, TOD centered, having the highest densities immediately in the area surrounding where the future Go Station will be, and then having transitions from there back into stable, into the stable areas. And in these scenarios, we're talking about potential populations of up to 45,000 people, 7,500 jobs, and a density of 310 people and jobs per hectare. And so you can see here we've got additional density along the north of this corridor, or north of this study area, supporting the intensification that is happening in the downtown core. As I say, focused density, the highest density around the GO station, and allowing for growth along some of the arterial corridors. Alternative 2, same density targets, 45,000 people, 7,500 jobs, but in a slightly, or in a fashion that is focused on those arterial roads, focused along Simcoe and Ritson. That's where the highest density will be. Again, some high density right by the GO station, but then the highest densities are on those arterial roads. And so again, allows for modest growth through kind of the stable areas of the M.T.S.A, focus the highest density near the GO station, really prioritizing that north-south density along the arterial corridors. And then finally, the third alternative that we're looking at, what we call bridging to downtown. Obviously, downtown being the most, what will be the most, or the densest area in the future scenario. So bridging that and really creating a spine, this one spine along Simcoe Street of the highest density. And this alternative does have the highest potential, bringing possible 51,000 people to the area, 8,500 jobs for a density calculation of 350 jobs, people and jobs per hectare. So I say, focusing on creating that seamless connection to downtown and really maximizing the benefit of the rapid transit investment that would be coming to Simcoe Street and making those connections to the GO station. And so from a future transportation analysis, absolutely, we have to understand if all of these people came, what would the road networks look like. And so we've looked out to the 2033 horizon, so 10 years from now. And at this point, all of these scenarios are really only in their infancy. As I say, these full growth for all these scenarios is 50 years plus. But from a transportation modeling perspective at this moment, we're just looking at 10 years because that's also the forecast that the region is working with, at least in the model that we're looking at right now. And so just looking at that model for the moment, and we will do some additional analysis in future stages, but what we are seeing in that analysis is the region's model is recognizing the need for improvements along Simcoe, Ritson, First Avenue. Under that existing in development scenario, that scenario I was speaking about where developers are already coming to the city about, we're seeing that the network performs generally the same way. And those improvements are on those same roads. Improvements are needed along First Avenue. Improvements are needed along Simcoe. Improvements are needed along Ritson. And then looking at all three of our alternatives, we see the same pattern. Again, that we recognize improvements are needed. We're not saying they're not needed. That is not at all what we're saying. We recognize those improvements are needed. There would be restricted flow if improvements weren't made. And so we again recognize and are seeing consistently through not only the region's modeling, but then looking at both the existing and proposed development scenario, as well as all three alternatives. All of them are showing similar operational performance. And so obviously, as this area transitions and once this plan is in place, we also want to ensure that there is an urban design plan and that there are guidelines to help developers be the most productive or have the greatest impact and ensure they are consistent with the vision and goals of this area. And so we have the urban design plan and implementation guidelines that we want to help kind of guide or provide principles and guide development in this area. And so we've proposed a few here this evening. Again, we're presenting them as draft, and we're really interested in hearing everyone's feedback on these, but we want to build a policy framework around complete streets and best practices around complete streets, around transit-oriented communities. Through selecting the preferred alternative, we want to establish what is the correct density for this area that is most appropriate to support this area. We want to establish the correct mix of built form. So again, back to that block discussion of what's the built form that is best for this area. We want to ensure that redevelopment creates complete communities, that it has all the amenities to support the growing population. So not just the homes and not just the jobs, but all of the other infrastructure, the parks, the schools, the other spaces. We want to ensure that our plan has those. Speaking of parks and open spaces, we recognize that is a major component of this. If you bring in that sort of density, we are going to need additional parks and open spaces. So we'll be looking at policies within this plan that help the city ensure that they can secure that necessary land and space as this area redevelops and evolves. We want to support the overall planning kind of revitalization and change that is occurring in the downtown, just north of the study area. We don't want to have two areas that are in competition with each other or clashing with each other. So we want to recognize the change and redevelopment that is happening in that downtown core and support that. And then we want a built form and a policy framework that supports modal shift. So less reliance on the automobile, personal automobile. And to do so, we have to ensure that there's access to the transit of the area, that the transit of the area is reflective of the built form of the area, and that there are those multimodal options available. And then we want to employ sustainable and green redevelopment and principles and identify those infrastructure upgrades that are necessary. So as I say, we're in stage 2. We wanted to present 3 alternatives. Our next stage is recognizing what is that preferred alternative. And it is not to say we will simply pick alternative 1, 2, or 3, and that's our preferred. We want to go through an evaluation and identify that alternative that is preferred. And the preferred alternative actually may end up being a combination of the two, or of 2 alternatives, or may be a modified 4th that comes from the feedback we're not only hearing from the public, but from our technical agencies that are participating in our advisory committee, as well as comments from city staff. And so that is what we will be doing over the next number of weeks, is doing that evaluation and then ultimately settling on a preferred alternative. So the questions that we will be asking ourselves in the evaluation that we'll be creating or doing is we want to understand which alternative provides the best conditions for redevelopment to accommodate population growth while creating complete communities for those who live in the area, and so that they can live and work and play in the area. We want to understand which alternative presents the most sensitivity to maintaining existing stable blocks and neighborhoods within the MTSA and surrounding context. We want to understand which alternative exhibits the best complement of the study's established land use objectives, including strengthening its connection to the downtown, protecting the cultural and natural heritage elements of the area, supporting economic growth, providing more affordable housing options. 4th, we want to identify which alternative best accommodates a reduction in automobile dependency and supports more sustainable and multimodal options. And finally, we want to understand which alternative would best deliver an overall positive transformation for this area and this neighborhood over the next 50 years. So those are the 5 sort of criteria or questions that we want to ask ourselves. We're encouraging those as part of this process. We want to have you identify, are there additional questions we should be asking ourselves? That you'll see that as part of the evaluation or the survey that you see here, and what we can get into as part of the question and answer shortly. But that is what we've established so far. And so again, I will just reiterate the study timeline before we will move over into the question and answer. And 7:40, 40 minutes. I said I would probably be 40, not 30. So thank you for listening. Yeah, see, I did warn you. See, Connor's right. I did warn you. But again, we are this project is not done. We are almost halfway, is what I would say. We're at the second of what will be 4 public open houses. So we are at the end of stage, or nearing the end of stage 2. We've identified those alternatives. We want to get your feedback. We're going to move into our stage 3, which is over the fall, where we will pick the preferred alternative. Once that preferred alternative has been selected, we're coming back to the public for our 3rd open house. So in the fall, please look for advertisement of it. If you signed up today, you will get direct notification of it. We'll be presenting that preferred alternative for, again, review, comment, questions. Before we move into stage 4, where we're finalizing the study and the supporting documentation around the study. Once all of that is done, we come back for our 4th public open house, where again, we will present, this is the final alternative that we've settled on. It's been refined since we last spoke. And here's all the supporting documentation. That will happen in the spring of 2024. And then finally, we'll conclude this study in the early summer of 2024, a year from now. So we have much to do with this project still. This is not the last opportunity. Tonight is not the only night for any of you or any of your neighbors to comment on what you see today. As I said, we're recording this. We will be posting the recording online. I won't be offended if you don't listen to it. That's okay. But it is there for anyone who wasn't able to attend in person and wants something more with more information than simply reading the boards. The boards are posted there as well. So you can read all of those again or share those with your neighbors and family members. And then we have the survey. Many of you have the hard copy of it in your hands. But again, there is a digital version as well that you can share. And we encourage you over the next 2 weeks to give us as much feedback as you want to. My contact information, Connor's contact information, we're sort of the project leads from both the city and the consultant, is on this final board. It's online in multiple places. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, email us, call us. We're here to have those conversations. And again, I thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you for waiting till 7 for us to start our presentation. I feel PIC3, we're changing our schedule again. Perhaps we'll get it correct on the third go. But at that point, sorry, I didn't hear, there's all the information.
Next slide.
All the information again. Again, if any of you have phones, QR code is really great. Takes you directly to our project study, which is on Connect Oshawa. We have a study website as well as on the city's main site. So it's either oshawa.ca/MTSA study or connectoshawa.ca MTSA/MTSA study. So thank you again. We'll move into question and answer. This is where I'm gonna get Mary Ann to help me with hands and whose hand went up first. We've also got 5 or 6 people online that have been asking questions. So we'll jump between the room and those online. And so I'm gonna turn it over to Mary Ann. She'll kind of manage our group here, and then both myself and city staff are here, as I say, for the next hour if we have to, answering your questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Fortunately, I apologize. I do have to bow out. I have a visitation I have to attend. But my lack of presence here for the question and answer is not to be diminishing the knowledge in the room, so to speak. Between Connor and Ranjit and Megan, they know everything 10 times over that I do. So they particularly Colin and Ranjit, they are the heavy lifters on this project from the city side. So between those two and John's team, you're in excellent hands. And you know, for myself, I want to thank you very much for coming out. We have a great crowd that's coming in on a very easy day. And by all means, I can't underestimate the importance of getting your input into this process. I mean, a lot of you live in this area. You'll be the ones directly experiencing the changes. So by all means, please, I would absolutely encourage you to ask questions, provide your comments. We'll be documenting all of this. It'll all be part of the record, and it's all information that we'll be condensing and absolutely making city council, our elected officials, aware of. You know, for those who aren't here, like Councillor John Gray. So anyways, on that note, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, so we got a question right back
Yeah,
there.
this may not be for you, it might be more for John, but in all this, I was just thinking, in tandem with all these developments and studies and everything, is the city looking at financial projections for each of the different options and looking at what taxes would come in based on the different options? Is that something you look at now, or?
No, it's not. We got to find out what the neighborhood wants, and then we'll take it from there. But typically, we're not making, so we put in this development, we have densities, and while we'll get more money out of it, we leave that through the planning process.
Yes, if I could direct your attention to alternative number 3.
Do you want to bring that up?
I'll come back to that. Yes, alternative 3.
And on Simcoe Street and Give on that corner is a school at the moment, and that's now marked in red or in the orange, which I think is high density.
Correct.
And then just to the north of that is the YWCA, the Adelaide House.
Right.
That's a historic building, if I'm not mistaken. So in order to develop those properties, what's going to happen with the school and Adelaide House? how are those addressed?
Yeah, so absolutely. So you'll actually notice, you know, that block in particular, because we did raise this point very early on when we were looking at these maps. You'll notice that block's one of the few that's actually split down the middle in terms of different colors. You know, the school site is very low density as it currently exists. It's got quite a large yard, quite a large parking area. You know, it's not necessarily unreasonable to think in the long distant future that that site could intensify. But like you said, there's a lighter color over the historic YWCA building there. And the intention would be is, like you mentioned, it has historic and cultural heritage value. I don't think we would foresee any large scale change happening there. But again, same principle, there is some infill opportunity in the long distant future. A lot of these colors and a lot of these maps, it's meant to represent full build out. And what full build out really means is it's either, you know, like John said, 50, 60 years. And, you know, we're really trying to kind of look at kind of the maximum possibilities and then work backwards from there in terms of our planning policy, our transportation policy as it relates to that, and kind of work our vision backwards from there. So I definitely understand on a parcel by parcel basis, some of these can be a little bit unnerving or overwhelming, so to speak. But really the goal of tonight is to kind of look at the patterns of growth and see out of the three patterns that we've portrayed here, kind of which pattern is kind of best suited to the area and which pattern best meets our evaluation criteria.
If I could just expand on my question a little bit, maybe there's someone here that might have experience with a school or a historic building like that. What may have happened in another city?
Well, I guess I'll add that these colors aren't meant to be prescriptive that change will happen. It is simply, as I say, permissions for development. And that's where I also, and similar to Connor's comment about, you know, those are relatively large parcels. And that's also why we spent a little bit of time on this slide talking about to achieve that color, if you're focusing on that color, that density, you can achieve it many, many ways. And so those large parcels, we'll use the school as the example. That school building could be maintained, could be perhaps demolished and made into a smaller footprint, taller structure, and then the rest of the site theoretically could be redeveloped for something else. So that's where the color talks about a number, and these are simply, we're talking about potential long-term 50, 60 years potential for each parcel. And within those parcels, particularly the large ones like that, you have many options. And I would go back to, from the heritage perspective, one of our guiding principles, one of our goals of this area is to be respectful and protect any heritage assets. So, you know, I don't have the list off the top of my head, but if that building on the northern half of that parcel is a heritage property, it would absolutely be protected naturally through natural or existing heritage designations. You know, I'll give the example of right on the GO station, where the GO station lot, the Nob Hill Farms property, there is a piece of that building that is a heritage building that will be protected through the redevelopment of this site. So heritage designations are important, and where they exist, they will be respected. We're not here to raise the community. As I say, this is a existing neighborhood that has the potential for redevelopment. This is very different than other GO extensions that you have seen in the last 20 years where they end up in a green field that nothing is there. So they're not disturbing anything, or they're not kicking out or changing anything. They're building brand new. This is different. This is the existing community that has existing residents, heritage features, cultural, natural features that need to be respected, all while we look for opportunities to bring in redevelopment and in new density to support the investment that is coming to the area.
Thank you.
John, we got some questions online here.
Okay.
One question is, I'm wondering how or if you are incorporating the plans for the Simcoe Rapid Transit plans.
So absolutely, the plan of rapid transit along the corridor is a component of our reason for intensification. You know, we recognize, and I think I've mentioned it once or twice in the conversation, was we see investment is coming to the area, particularly in transit, the biggest one being the GO line extension, but it is not the only. There is future rapid transit expansion on Simcoe Street. Exactly what it will be, still being determined, but we know it's coming in some form. And as well as the Durham Scarborough service that is in downtown, which is not too far from here. So those are the types of major investment we're talking about when we say change is coming to the area. And so we're looking at ways from a built form perspective, how can we best support that investment?
Just to add to that, Ranjit Gill here from Manager of Professional Services. In addition to what's happening on Simcoe Street, there's a separate study the region is doing to understand what needs to be built here. And in taking this study into consideration, line with what is proposed for that study. So since we're lucky that they're happening at the same time, we can feed each other. What we're proposing, the densities and all that, they can use as part of their projections for what's needed along Simcoe. So we're working hand in hand together with the region to understand the needs of this area with the rapid transit or with the densities or the developments that will happen in the M.T.S.A area.
Great. So we're just going to take one more online. I'm just going to mute. So you can ask your question.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Quick question. I'm just curious, as when you were doing your research, did you realize, especially closest to that GO station or the proposed GO station, that there is, or there are quite a few, I don't know if they're Oshawa persons or, you know, just people in need of social support that probably would not necessarily help the area? And I'm trying to be very mindful of my choice of words here. But ultimately, what I'm alluding to is that there are quite a few persons in that pocket, that exact area, that would probably need to be relocated before these developers start to build and they're displaced. I'm just wondering if there's any provision made for, you know, kind of moving some of these persons out of the area.
My short answer is that, you know, obviously if there are individuals that are you know, lack housing or lack stable housing that are in the area, you know, the city and the region, you know, have services that are available, and you know, as this area would redevelop, you know, the city, its developers would work with those services to provide support to those individuals as best as they could. This study, you know, is focused on what are the land uses and sort of the permissions for development. You know, when it comes to actual development happening, that sort of goes beyond the scope of this study, but absolutely is something the city considers in all development. And as I say, they have support services as well as the region that would, you know, intervene in a situation like that and provide support as best as they could.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much.
To add to that, I think that whole idea of providing the right services within this area is also something that we'll take into consideration as the housing type as well. So if there is a need for affordable housing and all that, that's part of our criteria to be assessing all these alternatives as well.
Yep.
The gentleman with the blue shirt.
It's not just the housing, it's accessibility. Now, I have seen downtown Toronto where you have all the big skyscrapers and they look very nice, but the sidewalks are deserts. There's nobody down there. You best start small. I mean, you say 50 years, we're going to grow. So don't anticipate a big group of people all of a sudden showing up. Grow with the demand, that way you have people out on the sidewalks enjoying the amenities. It's a live city, not an urban wasteland.
I agree. And that is exactly what we're trying to create. You know, we spoke about our, you know, our criteria of talking, is this alternative or whichever alternative we choose, we want it to support and foster a complete community, a community where its residents can get around in many different modes, you know, whether they want to walk down a sidewalk or hop on a bicycle or a e-scooter and use a facility. And so
said that the parks could be part of the city, but why can't the builders step up and make parks?
no, sorry,
Lots as well.
maybe I misspoke. It's
Yeah.
this area, as this density were to come to fruition and happen, the need for more park space
Yeah.
is evident. And so the city, in their role of planning approver, so approving those developments, would be looking from those developers or other opportunities to secure space,
Yeah.
to grow the amount of park and open space in this area, because it would absolutely be needed
And
with these.
accessibility.
Absolutely. And
John, if I may, so
Of
as
course.
well, I think it's important with parkland to kind of understand different developments will have different abilities to deliver parkland. So a development on a very large parcel, they may have enough land on their parcel to build a park on that piece of land. However, a small development or a group of small developments, by themselves, you wouldn't be able to build much of a park on a smaller lot. But if you combine kind of the parkland or the cash in lieu that development might provide, you can then use that to strategically place other parks in, you know, close by areas or expand on existing parks and whatnot. So
Talking about putting in a canopy over the rail line and making that parkland.
there's in Toronto's proposing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know they've talked about a rail deck park for a number of years.
So that's not out of the question.
It's certainly nothing at this point. When you're looking at a 50+ year timeline, I don't think
You want to be
anything's out of the
the
question.
cutting edge.
Yes, no, certainly when you're looking at a long time horizon, I don't think anything is out of the question. Technology will change in 50 years. We can't predict 50 years in the future, but best we can do is
Yeah,
really,
predict tomorrow.
I mean, best we can do is kind of lay a framework, set a plan, and be reactive as we move along, for sure.
Hey, the gentleman in the hat, you've had your hand for a while.
Yeah. Does this design plan include like, tree canopies on boulevards or anything like that for residents that would use the sidewalks? And, what are we doing with the one-way streets? Are those sticking around or are those going away? Like, I hate those things like that, okay?
so from a greening, you know, greening your boulevards, you know, absolutely, that's something like that is an element we'd be looking at in this kind of urban design kind of guidance or guidance documentation around how we see this area evolving, because recognize, you know, greening your streets has many benefits beyond, you know, the simple. So it would be something that we would look at, absolutely. The one-way streets, I'll turn it over to Ranjit.
So,
I will paint the lines myself.
just to follow up on what John and Carlos mentioned, again, what we're doing here, we're not deciding on what form we want to build. We were just deciding on what goal we want to achieve in terms of policy, what we want to allow. Yeah, what we want to allow for. So greening of the boulevards is one policy that we could have to specify that, you know, we want certain enhancements to our pedestrian routes. So we can specify that when developers do come in, we can say, look, we have a policy, you have to meet this, right? So that's how we enforce those kind of things that we want now and for the future. In terms of the one-way, two-way, we are looking at them definitely, and it is a direction from council to look at Albert, Salina, Brock, and Colburn. We're going through the design phase of those to see how we can best convert them into one-way, two-way, and then take it back to council's consideration to decide what they want to do with that, whether they want to proceed or not. So that's one of them. The other pairs will be looked at through our transportation master plan update, which is coming down the horizon. So we are definitely looking at them to see what will be the best solution for the future, then, and with all the development that's happening, to accommodate all that, and what's the best form of doing it.
Hey, the gentleman at the back, you had your hand up. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Robert. As a resident of Oshawa for 25 years, a resident of Durham region for 40 years. I'm very familiar with the provincial plan. I'm also familiar with the regional plan, which kind of dictates a lot of this 15, 20 years ago in forecasts. It's nice to see it coming to fruition. I do have a question with regards to two of your slides. Picture transportation analysis slide and the draft urban design plan and implementation guidelines. I have been to Ottawa. I've actually walked in that facility that you have there. And I remember it when my aunt lived there back in the early 80s. There was a lot of streets in there. And they had one-way street issues that they just eliminated, where now gardens and pathways and jobs that are in there, they're not just minimum wage jobs. They have lawyers' offices, doctors' offices. They have real estate buildings in there. So I'm very familiar with that particular design. As for transportation analysis design, I'm just trying to understand that particular design, which coincides with the northern development that's been taking place for the last 10 years around the college. And the integrated structures that you're talking about for rapid transit on 6th Street are to connect the new GO station to 407 and the college and universities that are up there now. Am I wrong in that subject?
No, absolutely.
So with the transportation analysis, some of these roadways down in this particular study area will end up becoming one way. It looks like they're planning on moving Richard Road to a one-way north street in the one picture there.
No, that's not our intent.
Future?
No,
Maybe the transportation gentleman.
no. Well, and I'll tell you, I'm a transportation gentleman as well. My background is transportation planning. So that analysis, it's meant to show you colored arrows in both directions,
right,
to show you the what is called volume. Volume capacity. So if one of them has only a single set of arrows northbound, that is a mistake on the board. It is meant to absolutely have a set of arrows coming southbound. Yeah. No, no.
That's what I would interpret.
Yeah. No. So all of that, those boards, and I say they're a first iteration of our analysis as well, because they're focused in on the 2033 horizon, which, as we've kind of been saying all along, this is a 50-year development. So this 10-year snapshot is just looking at a planning horizon that, is a horizon that is a focus of the region. And so we're doing some comparative, some apples to apples comparison of what's the region's forecasts looking like, and then how do our alternatives stack up? And so we're seeing similar results. And then
this is a beautiful design. You've given people that live in the actual area an opportunity to choose a couple of or a few different alternatives for the design, as well as implement their own aspects of what's there. And I really do think that bringing an industrial town like Oshawa has been for most of its history into fruition for the future is a fantastic thing. There's a lady that asked questions about historical buildings and whatnot. She needs an idea on how historical buildings get maintained. Sometimes they might pull the frontage of a building, put that frontage of a building inside. I think that's kind of what you were referring to, the Mount Hill one, where there's a part of that building that's going to be held in place and intact, and maybe have a little commemorative plate on it once the final aspects of whatever's going to go in there in the way of a high rise, because that's kind of what I'm observing from some of the density results for that immediate area. And I really think that you guys are doing a great job at allowing us to get our input in and giving us a visual picture of what could be. It'd be nice to see it happen quickly as opposed to slowly. And it would be nice to be able to see that part of Oshawa down to the 401 become as one with the downtown core where a lot of stuff does happen across King Street and John Street.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd love it to be.
To put my 2 cents worth in and ask my question, you did it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
John, yeah, I wanted to add, because I noticed this theme coming up a little bit tonight, quite a bit, with respect to jobs, commercial, employment uses and whatnot. So in the first phase of the study, we did have Crystal White's group, that's
Parcel economics.
Look at basically a commercial market analysis, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And as part of that, they evaluated the whole kind of general area around Oshawa. They looked at kind of what this area could support. They looked at what downtown will be supporting in the future. They looked at what the Oshawa Center area would be supporting in the future. And they looked at what the Bloor Corridor would be supporting in the future in terms of employment, commercial, retail, office, et cetera, et cetera. Their findings showed that it was essentially for this particular area, it was meant to be kind of ancillary to downtown. So downtown is the major office, retail, culture area of the city. This area is able to support a much more modest amount of commercial, which is why you'll see, and it was pointed out earlier, it's true, there is quite a bit more residents shown than there is jobs. And I mean, part of that is people are going to get on the GO train and go to work in Toronto. That's the reality of the GO train system. But certainly there'll be quite a bit of employment in Oshawa elsewhere as well. The downtown, the various commercial corridors. And that's not just retail, that's office, that's industrial areas and the rest of Oshawa, and obviously also some on the GO train to Toronto. So I know this is very specific to one area, but I did want to note that just because I know it's come up quite a bit tonight.
Right, and I would just add one final thing to that is when you're talking 7,500 potential jobs, very similar to what the gentleman pointed out, which the example we have is the Breton Flats in Ottawa, is at 7,500 jobs. Yes, there will be a lot that are service based, but with that density, you would also have those smaller lawyers' offices and the type. Would you have a large corporate headquarters? Likely not. But you wouldn't simply have 7,500 jobs that are service-based. You would have that mix, absolutely.
And I guess one final point too, I know we talked about the First Avenue site, the large site, where the open house was held in November. I believe they do have a large, not large, but they do have a portion of their square footage dedicated to office uses as well as retail. Obviously, I mean, you add, I think it's 8,000 residents in the full build out. You're going to need services, you're going to need commercial, you're going to need retail, but they are also accommodating for office, which is great.
So we got a question on the line here. Are you planning to develop distinct bike lanes that connect the main north and south?
Short answer, yes, absolutely. We're looking for opportunities that, what is the transportation system? So multimodal, bike lanes and multi-use paths and sidewalks that are needed to support this development. What are the transit? How can we work with the transit providers to provide the transit opportunities of the area? And then what are the roads needed from a vehicle perspective to support this area? So it's a comprehensive approach that we're looking at all of those uses. And, as we said in one of our slides, to reduce the dependency on the single automobile is at the core of this project is we want to provide those alternative options.
Okay, go ahead.
Question. 30 years ago, I moved into Oshawa. In a specific area, the Albert Street Bridge was supposed to have been done 30 years ago. Why is it still now just blocked off? And you guys, the Albert Street Bridge, it's the CP
or the CP?
Over the CP.
CP owns that bridge.
No, not anymore. No, we never did. It's a CP.
It's a CP. Yeah.
CP.
But if you're gonna do that and you're working all around First Street and Simcoe and Ritson, There's so many other streets around in that area that needs attention. I understand what you're saying with all the development in 50 years or whatever. That's been gonna be done like years ago. And you guys are centering out certain areas that need to be developed. The north end has got so much. The south end has got so much. Central Oshawa has nothing in the last 30 years. Nothing. And you guys are trying to do that now? I don't understand. You wanted to build the businesses. You wanted to bring people here. 30 years. I've been here 30 years and you're going to say it's going to take another 50 years before you get it all done? What about the people here now that were wanting this years ago?
I don't have an answer. You know, again, I hear your frustration though. I understand your frustration.
I'm just saying, you're saying you're gonna do it and do it and do it, but north gets done, built up, beautiful. South end gets built up, done, beautiful. You know how many people go into Central Oshawa and look at it and go, nope. Or they get harassed by people that want stuff, that want, you know, can you get in my car and do me a favor? This is what goes on in Central Oshawa.
Well, I hear you, and
And I'm frustrated, like, you guys, and it's like, why now?
And I mean, in terms of the timing, a lot of this is tied to investments that are made by non-city people. So the GO Train investment.
But you guys put,
Simcoe
the city put so much standards on so many people. Somebody wanted to build on 64 or 63 Albany Street. He turned around and walked away from it because you guys said, no, we can't, because you didn't give me this or this or this or this or this. City Hall walked away from them.
Not true. They cashed out. As soon as they got the density, they cashed out.
But it took him so long to get the permits that he walked away from it.
He applied, people came in and said, we want this development. Then he increased the size of his development, came back, we've never had one, and people again demanded, let's get this done. And then he cashed out. It's a company in Hamilton right now that has it. And we can't control when they decide to proceed with their development. You just have to patiently wait, unfortunately.
But why does he have to get I knew the guy that owned the place, that owned the land, and he had to get so many permits or so many assessments like noise control and all this other kind of stuff.
Those are all the same standards that staff apply to any development. Noise, heritage,
But the whole
indigenous.
all Central Oshawa is all heritage. Those are GM houses that are all down there.
Yeah, that's not what they're looking at, but.
But they're all heritage. They're all heritage houses.
No,
They're all
that's not
original GM
A lot of those
houses.
properties got demolished that you're talking about.
No, I'm not. No, I am not.
That empty lot, that empty lot, it's empty for a reason.
But my house is over 100 years old.
Mine too.
So nobody's disputing that. You don't,
But it's in that area.
so. We're all, that's why.
You're not getting the point.
People are here to see to make their comment on the future development here.
But how come it's taken over 30 years when they said they were gonna do it 30 years ago?
Well, I wasn't around here 30 years ago on
Well-
council, but I know that bridge that you just referenced has been studied to death, and it's been structurally every
It's unsafe.
10 years or so, we have to do a study on that bridge. And now it's been closed off, I presume, because it's no longer deemed to be safe for our
It's not,
cars.
it hasn't been safe.
Well, I mean, I believe Metrolinx put out a few weeks ago that essentially for the trains that they want to build under the bridge, they're going to need to remove the bridge. So we are looking at, through this study, kind of the different travel.
Well, they
routes
were
and
gonna
whatnot.
expand the bridge wider and make it out of concrete. Is
Yeah.
what they were gonna
So
do.
the current bridge, there's, I believe they've looked at it, and there's no way it's feasible to expand it or retrofit in any way. If there's going to be a bridge there, it would be a new bridge.
Well, yeah, and I have no problem with that. I was just wondering why it was taken over.
Yeah, and we're certainly
So long.
cognizant of that, absolutely.
And I think the city is tied in a sense that we don't have the resources to do what's needed here. We have to wait until a higher entity like a province.
Oshawa, because of that reason.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. I moved here 30 years ago. If I had a choice to not come back here, I would have never come back here.
And I mean, I completely understand what you're saying about how certain areas that are maybe greenfield areas, those are areas like the north, like you said, which are basically farmland, so that there's not as much of a complexity to it, because like you said, there's not an existing context, there's not existing houses and whatnot. Certainly it does add complexity. Part of, doing this and part of kind of the outcome of this study is to have recommendations that allow us to make changes to our official plan, make changes to our zoning bylaw, so that when a development, like one of the high density developments that are kind of proposed in and around the area, when they come to us, we can say, oh, we already have the permission for the density that you want to achieve. We already have the height permission that you want. We don't have to go through this process of getting an amendment to our zoning bylaw or amendment to our official plan to allow that height or density. It's already in place. It's essentially, it's pre-zoned almost to a certain degree. And that is kind of the idea of this overall planning process, is that we can kind of show the development community, so to speak, that, okay, we're ready for this kind of growth in this area. Whereas, like you mentioned before, it's a process to go through because it's not zoned for that kind of height or density. So I can understand that. Any greenfield
houses, any kind of, like townhouses, it doesn't have to be a high rise.
No, absolutely.
But it could have been there.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to come to Oshawa. That is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, the zoning does allow medium to low density townhouses, and landowners may have higher aspirations than that. They may want higher medium density and whatnot. So yeah, certainly that's something we're looking at. And it looks like Marion's looking at me.
Yeah,
You have another question?
no, it's good. We have a lot more questions. The project team will be around after the present, like the Q&A, so you can sit there.
You're always welcome to contact me separately.
You guys are all good. You answered a lot of it.
I'm not going anywhere.
You've got people coming in. What about the schools? You've already lost 2 schools in this area. Now the kids have got to be bused past Ritson to 2 other schools. I don't think that's fair.
We need to add 2 more schools.
We need to
to
add schools to the area. Not get rid of them.
And again, so the school boards are a regional entity, but that's where, again, we're looking at what are the permissions for the land, and then what are the associated amenities, parks, schools, other community facilities that would be needed to support this. And that's what this study will identify. We will look at, of a population of 45,000, how many can you estimate would be school age? And therefore, what would you need?
It's been closed for a good 11 years now.
Understood.
33. Because it's not right. Why can't they have that as a school for the kids instead of having to bus them so far away? And half the kids, they can't take the bus. So they're walking along Olive. And some of the idiots that drive along Olive, they race along there and the kids are above the tree.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer, I don't work for the school board that why they closed it, but from our project's perspective, we will be identifying those types of amenities that would make this a complete community, that it would need those things. And so we'll be looking to the school board. We're saying, hey, if we've got this land use permission, we need space for, make up a number, 2,000 students. And then it's their requirement to support that or to plan for that. So that's what we are looking at in making this a complete community, is what are all of those amenities that are needed. So it's part of this study that we recognize there's not schools here, there's not community facilities here, there's a lack of park space here. All of that will be addressed in this study.
That dog park. Yeah. We don't have a dog park somewhere.
And John, if I may too, with the schools as well, I mean, like John said, we can't speak to TDSB or the Catholic School Board's decisions with respect to closing schools. In terms of new schools and new opportunities for schools, we are involved with the school board's a stakeholder in the study, and they are circulating all the materials. And B, we are connected with the development planners of the city to make sure that when the development planners get developments, that they're getting comments back from the school boards. Those are shared with us, shared with Parsons, so we can ensure that we're all aligned in terms of what the needs are and what comments DDSB and the Catholic School Board are providing.
We need to preserve park in.
And certainly parkland is a huge part of this as well. And, you know, we work with our park staff or stakeholders in this as well.
People are still letting their dogs off leash.
So we got a question at the back. You can patiently wait in. Yes.
Okay, so I've lived in Oshawa for 30 or plus years. And I have loved living downtown because you can walk to the different amenities and such. So I'm very excited about the GO train coming because I can walk to the GO train. And as a senior, I get like a real nice discount on the GO train. My question is, will this increase the downtown property value? Or will it, like, and what's the projection for that? Like people who own property in the in this area, will our house values go up?
So I mean, generally speaking, transit investment does in turn compel land value increase. Certainly I would expect downtown to have some reciprocal relationship when the GO train station and the Simcoe transit and the Durham Scarborough BRT does come to fruition. So yes, I don't know if this study directly is going to have a downtown land use or land value relationship, but certainly transit investment does.
You talked about permissions. If one of these alternatives goes through, does that mean the city now will just say, okay, yeah, you don't have to keep applying for permits, or is it, how does that work?
So it wouldn't apply to building permits, but with respect to planning applications. So for example, if you apply for an official plan amendment and the official plan says, as of right now, oh, you can only build up to 4 stories and, you know, this area that's lighter yellow. If we take a preferred alternative through, take it all the way through this study, go to a point at the end of the study where we're looking at official plan amendments, we amend the official plan to make it, oh, now it's a darker yellow or it's an orange. Then yeah, if you apply for something that is in that darker orange area, and this is a very simplified version of this, obviously, but you would still need to get your building permit, but you may not need to get an official plan amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. I do. So again, so let's use this one here for example. So you're putting in 22,500 home with 45,000 residents. So this scale right here, how many vehicles could that incorporate? Personal vehicles.
How many
So,
would be?
yeah, out of the 45,000 residents, what, 30% could have a personal vehicle? 10% could have a personal vehicle for the infrastructure?
I think that whole aspect of how many cars, how many trips will be generated, what services will be needed, what's the, anything to support, anything to support that type of population has to come out through the studies that we're gonna do. We will figure out, like the transportation office, how many trips are gonna be generated, how many cars, new cars are gonna be there.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm asking. You're saying in your presentation that you want to limit and change the modalities by people.
Yes.
People by the modalities by which people commute. Right. So you want to have bike paths, you want to have walking paths. This is why there's all these scooters all of a sudden in town, right? So, and because we're going to be near the GO station, okay, you think that personal vehicles should be limited. So you must, being a transit area study, okay, you must have an idea with 45,000 residents. You must attribute, even if it's just a guess, okay, how many of those 45,000 residents could own a personal vehicle and still maintain the infrastructure?
And that's what that slide is, the future transportation analysis.
That's what's the percentage? I'm asking you.
I don't have the numbers right here in front of me, but what we do is take the projections of how much density is being proposed in this area, convert that into how many people are going to be there, convert that into how many cars will be there, and convert that back into how many trips will be on which road.
That's what I'm asking you. So give me can you give me that?
I can't give it to you because I don't have that number with me. I can show you that that's what the summary of the analysis is, that slide there.
10 years.
A given lane of traffic carries between 600 and 800 vehicles an hour, single lane of traffic. So if you count up the lanes of traffic in this entire study area, there is space for I don't know, 30,000 vehicles in an hour. We're not here to, there will be no restriction on ownership of a vehicle. We're simply trying to provide a built form that would encourage people to use alternative modes. We suspect people will choose to live in this area and simply hop on the GO train and go into.
There definitely will be a restriction on vehicles if you're putting that kind of infrastructure in.
There will be no restriction on ownership.
I'm not saying restriction on ownership. I'm saying people will be restricted because if you put in 13 high-rise buildings across the street from my house, you can only dig down so far. So there's no parking. There's no means to even own a car because there's no parking. So what I'm asking you, these are your findings, okay? So you must have in mind what your infrastructure for each one of these can handle as far as vehicle. Parking rates, okay?
This study doesn't establish the parking rates of the area. That would be an outcome of this study, but
So basically, can I just interject here? So this study is basically like we were talking earlier, like you were speaking about, you're getting pre-permission to develop these areas.
Not pre-permission.
Well, you're
You're establishing what the permissions are. Everyone will still have to go through the planning process, but as Connor said, we are simply changing currently in the area. Nearly every development that is coming forward currently requires amendments because it is asking for densities that are not permitted. So by changing densities, we will have a large series of developments that now will come forward and move to approval.
I get it. I don't know that everybody else gets it. I understand exactly what you're saying.
And I mean, too.
So
like,
what I'm saying, you're having this, and this alternatives, okay, in density, but you have no plan for personal vehicle ownership within any of these.
That's what that study is. We're trying to understand the
Really have
capacity
no
of the road
plan
network.
of personal vehicle ownership beyond.
Not yet, not yet.
But even
Once
right
we-
now. But what I'm saying is you have a potential, shut up, okay? Shut up. I like,
Excuse me.
like I'm talking, you can't answer my
You've been
question.
rambling for a long, long time.
I'm trying to get a question answered.
And you seem to be focused on one subject only, and it's your own personal interest. There's a whole audience here with respectful questions.
How do you know that it's just my personal interest?
Okay, let's.
So basically, what you're saying is 45,000 residents, okay?
Will generate a number of vehicles. And that is what, once we have a preferred alternative, we will take the analysis that you see there and go into much more detail, which will get potentially to a number that we can share. At this point, we don't have those numbers. That's what Ranjit was saying. That's what I've been saying. We're looking at analysis. We're saying the road network appears to be have capacity constraints, and therefore you would need to expand the road network. We've already said that.
Yeah.
And then once we have a preferred alternative, we're going to not only look at 2033, but we're going to look at future horizons to say, does that change? And are there even greater capacity issues that we need to address? And to address capacity, we may need to expand networks, or we're going to need to provide alternatives.
So I'm going to Ranjit on the phone. He talked about taking out the Albert Street Bridge.
Yes.
Removing the Albert Street Bridge, and then the 3rd Street and 2nd Street would go through where the PPG was, okay? So think about that. How does that increase the viability on a vehicle or on a bicycle or even walking to the area? It doesn't. It limits viability to the area.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop you there. The project team is around after to answer more questions. We have other hands up starting there. Yeah.
I just wondered, when you say sustainability, the 2033 Durham Region model, what sort of assumptions are you making for transit modal split? And I'm assuming active transportation is not in there. How do you deal with the delta between that 10-year horizon and the long-term build out in terms of accounting for active transportation, accounting for very unpredictable micromobility, and ensuring that that piece is huge, because that catchment area for potential active transportation, micromobility extends way beyond these lands. So like from that kind of perspective of bringing people into this space, how do we ensure that we're not just relying when it comes to sustainability on transit and, kind of discounting or, if it's 2% or we're going to double it to 4% for active transportation.
So that's where it is something that will be flushed out in greater detail in our following phase. Once we have the alternative, so we can work with the preferred, we'll be working very closely with the region with their model. So yes, there's a baked in assumption there of, I believe it's high 20% of sustainable. So transit and walking, cycling. And we will be working with them. We'll be working as experts in transportation planning of what is a reasonable future percentage. Is that 40, 50? What is it? And that's what we need to look at. And from a study area perspective, you're absolutely right that our study area is bound by, yes, the lines on this map, but our catchment area for our study is 2 major streets to the east, I think 3 major streets to the west. Like we have a much larger catchment area that we are studying from a traffic operations perspective because we recognize there's those interconnectivities.
Just quick follow-up, like I know Simcoe is well spoken for with the BRT. So what's the impact for Ritson? Especially if you're looking at alternative 3, which is kind of skewing the development permissions towards Simcoe. Right? Like
well, so in all scenarios, we're looking at that Ritson does have a capacity issue as well. So what is the solution? We don't have that yet. Could it be more lanes? Possibly, but it could also be greater transit service, or it could be active transportation use. Like that's what we will be honing in on once we have the preferred alternative is what are all those improvements needed? What is the appropriate mode share that we forecast to be happening? And then working very closely with the region and their modeling, understanding not only the impacts within the study area, but on the surrounding land.
Okay, thank you. Sir, you can go ahead.
Could you go back to the existing map there, please?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I've been flicking. Oh, no, you need to just click on that. Existing, there you are.
Okay. I just wanted to point out that you have Gibb Street there and you have it going down where that's not correct because it hasn't been built yet.
Yes, no, sorry. We have shown, and I should have stated that is the Gibb Olive realignment. And we've shown the assumed right of way as currently shown in the region's preliminary design plans.
That wasn't my question. I just wanted to point that out. In the feedback, you talked about one of the concerns is, and it will be a concern, is the improved safety and security of the area. Has that been addressed yet at all? Have you talked about this, the safety and security of that area at all? Because once you get the more land or more, like, I don't know, the next one there, that I think where it showed the apartment buildings coming in, the 2 proposed ones.
Yep.
That one, yes. You have the 2 red apartment buildings coming in proposed or whatever soon and other stuff. You're going to see more density there. So safety and security of that area is not very good right now. What's going on with did it even been discussed? Any safety or security?
So I would say development applications, the region would be.
I think when we talk about safety and security and whatnot, so certainly safety, I think we touched on safety for road users and pedestrians and cyclists and whatnot. So that's certainly part of the safety that we touched on. In terms of like personal safety and security.
Of the areas of being built of the residents there and of the residents that are already there.
Because I'd be afraid to walk down that street. I am afraid to walk down that street.
So safety. So obviously I can't speak directly to like crime and things like that. That's out of scope. That's DRPS and whatnot. When it comes to the streets themselves, safety and visibility and good principles of good design is something that will be worked into the urban design plan and guidelines. Because street design is a huge part of ensuring safety, as well as having more eyes on the street. As you have more units, as you have more people living in the area, typically busier streets are safer streets because you have more people and there's more visibility. Typically, places like secluded alleys and streets without a lot of eyes on them, those are the less safe areas. So as you add units, as you design your streets better, which we're hoping to do through the urban design plan, hopefully that's at least addressed as much as we can in terms of a planning and transportation study.
John, we have a question on the phone.
Yep. So the person on the phone, you can unmute yourself.
Hi there.
Hi.
Can you all hear me? Hi. Okay.
Yes, we can
Thanks
hear
for
you.
taking my question. My question was for the team that's conducting the study. What sort of studies have been conducted by that team in the past? Do you have an example, just so we can kind of look at?
So what studies have we Parsons done in the past?
Yeah. Sorry. So, like, what? I guess have you done this in another city? And what city?
I mean, Parsons as an entity, a corporation, has been around for 70 years. We are a kind of full service engineering and planning firm. We have done a number of similar studies in the city of Ottawa. Myself personally, I've done studies like this, in Durham region, the town of Ajax, across the GTA in Brampton, and many others. So it's, we are definitely a qualified firm, I would say. I don't think the city would have hired us if we weren't. But absolutely, I encourage you to visit our website or reach out to me directly. My contact information's on the slides, and we can give you more examples if that's what you're looking for.
Perfect. No. I didn't mean to offend or anything. I just was curious as to what other projects have been or studies have been conducted by the firm, and I guess past experiences I can look at. But perfect. I'll do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sir.
Because I have one question and one comment. First has to do with the Albert Street Bridge that you discussed before. I'm sort of confused. Has there been a decision on whether that stays or goes? Haven't heard anything about that. Looking at the transportation maps, when you got the deficiencies on Simcoe Street and deficiencies on Richardson Road, it would seem to me that has to be part of the solution. And I know.
Yes, I was going to say, from a Metrolinx accommodating the GO service, the bridge as it exists has to be removed.
Absolutely.
Now, for the need for a new bridge, and if that is even feasible, is something that this study will look at, because exactly that's the type of potential solution that could accommodate, capacity issues on Simcoe and Ritson, is providing for capacity across Albert. Whether that is plausible is something we have to look at, because we understand, with a station and a GO service that is going in very close proximity to Albert, it may not be physically possible to accommodate a modern structure in that area. But that's something we will be looking at in future phases of this study, and working closely with Metrolinx as they advance the design of what that service will ultimately look like.
Thanks for that. The second part is my comment. In terms of active transportation, we seem to try to accommodate that by putting bicycle lanes on our busiest roads, which to me, doesn't seem to be the best solution we have here. Particularly in an area like this where you've got a good grid system of streets. And I've seen in Vancouver, for example, where they've established bike routes, and they would put a small roundabout at every single intersection. So it has the advantage of slowing down traffic, which is good for residents and discouraging a lot of through traffic. And I would just lay that forward that you've got lots of opportunities for something like that in this neighborhood, rather than putting in your bike lanes on the arterial roads.
You're absolutely correct, and that is absolutely what we're looking at. I would say I'll say my industry, the transportation industry of the last couple of decades, there were instances where bike lanes were simply put on arterial roads because that was the easy solution. That's not what we're looking for here. We're looking at complete, comprehensive solutions, and that is going to be multiple layers of facilities. You've got an unbelievable multi-use trail that runs right through this study area. It's only one of them, but it is an unbelievable asset of this area. And so how do we connect to it? How do we enhance it? And doing things like that will keep bike lanes off the Simcoes of the world because people don't want to bike on Simcoe. We recognize that.
Gentleman at the back, yes.
Yeah. A present here. Yeah, the question was asked right. I just want to re-ask you again. Generally speaking, how are property values affected? Projects like these, generally with these kind of development projects.
So as was said previously, generally with major transit investment, and we're talking things like a GO line extension or higher order transit, like what is contemplated on Simcoe or what is proposed for King Street in downtown. Historically, investments like that do see increases in property value. What that exact increase is beyond anyone here of our knowledge. But what we can say, yes, we would expect when you make an investment like that, or when higher levels of government make investments like that, property values tend to increase.
Okay, and just a follow-up on that is generally this type of project, is it to developers who are paying for carrying most of the load, or is the city paying for additional infrastructure? By property taxes, provincial and federal funds involved?
So a majority of this majority of the infrastructure that would be required in this area, I would believe would make its way into the development charge bylaw that the city has. And so a majority would be funded through development. There would be some amount that is burdened by existing residents or the existing tax base. But in an area like this where you see significant development and infrastructure needed to support that development, it would be funded by development and what is called development charges.
Okay.
Right at the back? There? Yes, yeah.
I don't want to cause any offense, although it might sound offensive, and I'm going to talk about density block, if I can, if you can clarify. And for instance, living in an apartment, I lived in an apartment for 20 years, and so it's not, I've never heard anyone's feelings if they're living in an apartment. First, it's an anecdotal statement. At the end of my street, they built a 60-unit apartment building and there's not enough parking spaces. And when I went to see it the other week, because I was thinking of the parents, and she said, well, we don't have enough parking spaces. We're hoping people will, in one-bedroom apartments don't thrive. We can, the people that have two-bedroom apartments, man and woman, who each have cars, will have a place to put their cars. So I'm not so quick to be dismissive of this woman's comments because it may come back to bite, that she is bringing up what I'm saying anecdotally happened at the end of my street. And now that they're wanting to park, they don't know where to put their cars. So that's the reality of what she is saying. I get her point. So I thank her for bringing that up because it triggered me to tell you that that's the reality of something that's just being built this year. That's anecdotal, so I'm going to move on to my point. When you look at the block bill, if you could turn it to that, thank you. The purple code, which is the highest, the very high density, it's 800 versus the very first one, which is what, 150?
Yeah, less than 100.
Less than that. Okay. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an urban planner, but I've done enough reading in both of those areas to have some concerns that that's even as an alternative. The reason being that the French architect and the planners here know who the name of the person is. And so the French architect who built the high rise. It was originally the high rises were only for storage in office space, office buildings for 6 hours a day, never to have been lived in. But we have now warehoused people into them, so that this is a dream for the future. My concern is young people dream for a home, not to live on the 47th floor of something that's 650 square feet.
the Juliet balcony, where you just get, it's standing room only, there's no place to put a chair. So that to me, when you said it's about, they're still being evaluated, I would say, why is that even on the table? Because there's enough, if not research, anecdotal, that the police have said that high rises are fire services that fire services that they're high risk, these high rises. There's a fire. Accidents can happen in a high rise in terms of fire. The other one is they become drug labs. There's enough in Toronto that say that they're drug labs, and this is a police concern. And another is about if they've now become safe havens for trafficking. So that's even up for discussion, troubles me, because I'd like that instantly removed. Unless you're beside all these huge high rises, you're going to put in mental facilities to help people to deal with their helplessness and their hopelessness and despair. Because you don't work, it's a 40-hour week, but some people have to work 80 hours to get the 40 hours done, and then you race home to live in a box. So I would hope that the high rise could be discouraged, and that to me is not. It is densification, but it's from a sociological thing. I say that is just mental health unhealthiness. And 20 years later, these high rises have become the place of low income, poverty. And you can go to places in Toronto that when they were built, like St. James Place or whatever, St. James or James?
St. James.
They were just, they're just in Crescent Town. They were just the end all be all. And now that's, it's poverty. Because it breeds despair, and despair leads to poor choices, which leads to a life of potential crime, whatever. So, high density in terms of high rise is not an office where you go for 6 hours a day. That people have to live there. And I'm just hoping that potential gets reevaluated as not okay with all the research and sociological studies that are out there to even make that a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman in the hat.
Yeah. Do you guys have any studies available or comparisons where this type of mixed land use development has been successful? I'm sure there's places in the United States, Canada that have had success in these models that you're proposing.
Lead to the LeBreton Flats, the pictures right behind you, in Ottawa is an example of a mixed use, recent development. I mean, in the GTA and in Southern Ontario, generally redevelopment plans like this are based around major transit. So Ottawa has a lot of great examples along their LRT lines. Vancouver is actually a world leader in redevelopment around their SkyTrains. So I would point to you to those types of projects that are happening. I mean, Vancouver is in Ottawa. We've been heavily involved in their LRT work. In Vancouver, I'm sure we had some input. I don't know right offhand, but absolutely, it's.
And just generally speaking, because those are a little older projects, right? How have they been successful? Like, how successful have they been? Like, was the quality of life improved? Did,
I mean,
GDP go up? Or?
In Vancouver, it is the examples of redevelopment in Vancouver are used as gold standards in the industry. They are, they're seeing changes in mode share where greater than 50% of the people are using transit.
So you see a reduction.
They're seeing just transformations all over, kind of complete transformations. And so
the 401 can't get any bigger. That's for sure.
Well, you could try.
You could try.
But yeah, no, I agree. So I would point to Vancouver. They are absolutely leading the way in kind of how they've supported not only the original kind of SkyTrain, but their expansions that they've done over the last decade are all supported by plans in areas much like this with, very large densities that are put in relatively short periods of time, but they transform the areas.
Well, I guess that's the kind of exercise that the city is going now, and that's what we're seeing in other parts, not just in the Greater Toronto area, the Greater Toronto region, but almost around the world. We see a trend towards mixed use, a trend that still needs to be assessed, if you like, in North America. We see a lot more of that in Europe, in other parts of the world, and we can point to our own place here in the Greater Toronto region, the success that we're having, becoming a vibrant, if you like, community in the broader sense of that. We're quite different from many metropolitan regions in the US.
Yeah. Back in Denmark, 1 in 6 families own a car. If you want to have a car, you rent it. Everybody else owns bicycles.
We're getting there. We're getting into the shared mobility. We're getting into a different ways of mobility. Just to answer your question, I'm a senior director with Parsons. And just to respond to your question and the question of the gentleman on the phone earlier about our experience, over 70 years, we've been involved in just infrastructure, primarily in urban settings. I have 33 years of professional experience, all of those in the Greater Toronto area, with a lot of involvement in the region of Durham, working for the master plan, working for the strategic plan for technology and these types of things. So from an experience perspective, you cannot get anything better than Parsons. We're in top tier consultancy world, if you like, along with a few other firms that can provide that. And a lot of work for transit agencies, the Metrolinks of the world, the TTCs, Translink in Vancouver, as John indicated, and so on. So the experience and the expertise is there to deliver this type of study. We're very grateful. We acknowledge the presence today. We acknowledge even frustrations that are being expressed. And
You live in a house or an apartment?
I grew up in an apartment.
But you live in a house or an apartment now?
That's correct. And I'm looking.
You live in a house or an apartment?
I live in a house now.
There you go.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I'm getting into.
And you took his question, and then this gentleman just started typing. I don't even know who he is.
I'm a senior director with Parsons. I'm a project director for this assignment here. I apologize for being a bit late. I missed the front of the open house, but I was here for the most part of the presentation. But I'm a transportation engineer by training and trade, and I'll be happy to address your questions.
Well, this is the Motor City. This is Oshawa. This is called the Motor City.
Yes.
Do you know why it's called the Motor City? Because we build cars here.
Absolutely.
And the #1 industry in this city has been that. This has been the city that has motivated Canada, okay? We build cars here. We still build cars here. You know what the problem with that is, though? We don't take taxes from General Motors. We don't charge taxes from General Motors. That's why we have to bring in these great big corporations to build these monstrosity, disgusting cities to try and mix it in with heritage buildings. That doesn't look anything heritage to me. That's a distraction from what went on here, from what the people that came here and built this place, okay? It's a distraction. The fact that we don't take taxes from GM is the reason why all of these vipers, these people that have come here to buy property, and then they diminish an area. This is why they've left this area impoverished like this, because now's the time to come in and buy it up cheap, cheap, cheap. So then they can put their bullshit skyscrapers, and they don't give a rat's ass. They don't give a rat's ass what happens to your kids or the families or anybody that is going to be living in this area. They don't care. They don't care. Okay.
Your concerns, your frustrations have been heard.
Oh, no, it's not my concern, it's my frustration. I live in the south of Oshawa, okay? I live in an area of Oshawa that has been under construction for 2 years, okay? My house is right across the street from PPG. I lived under construction for the last 4 months. I lived under construction last year. So how many people are prepared to live under construction for the next 50 years?
Okay, we're gonna take some last questions here. Sir, you had a question at the back.
We can talk about how GM transforms itself.
Giannis, let's take that offline. Let's.
Yeah, Sarah, you can go ahead.
Thank you. So my question can answer by the city. So after 2024 summer, when you would have made your final presentation to the city, is there a timeline as to when the vote will be taken on the full rezoning exercise? What timeline are we looking at?
Well, when it comes back, council will debate it, may have questions, potentially send it back for clarifications. And then it'll eventually get to the planning department. I would think, might we look at fall 2024 potentially, maybe a little bit later. And then there would be full public input again. And then at some point, the council will, approve it, amend it, whatever. And that would be the time.
Have to go through all the major committees again.
Well, it'll always be basically development services that we're gonna go.
Oh, the advisory committees, I think he's mentioned.
We'll have to go through.
Yeah.
Is that?
We'll have to go through accessibility. and building.
Advisory committees, it'll be, all advisory committees as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking too about like what comes after this. It's dependent somewhat on like what is being recommended, right? Like if there's one or two things that are recommended to change, then obviously there'll be one or two public consultations with respect to that. If there's a wide range of things that are going to change, then obviously there'll be a wide range of public consultation. And there's different requirements under the Planning Act for different kinds of changes. There's different requirements under the E Act for different kinds of changes. So at this point, it's kind of premature to say, oh, we're going to have this consultation, this consultation, this consultation, but we will kind of do what is required under the Planning Act, under the EA Act, and essentially it's very dependent on what comes out of that summer 2024 step.
Just to add to that, sorry, I think as far as reaching the end of the study, we would probably have after that with any changes. I think even the provincial government is pushing planning approval authorities to advance especially the M.T.S.A areas to have zoning in place shortly after provincial plans are approved.
Yeah, and that step is beyond this. So this study is going to come to a conclusion that says, this is the alternative we believe is appropriate. Here are the policies supporting it, the studies that were used to assess it. Council will decide if they accept that, and then once accepted, then it goes through its planning process, as Megan was saying, to enact that within the bylaws and zoning of the city.
And as we are getting to 9, I think maybe one or two more.
Yeah, is there any?
If there is any more.
Sure.
Yeah, can you go back to the north-south? I'm kind of thinking you have your blocks of development, the railway tracks, and you've talked about cars. Can you enlighten me as to how people flow north and south? In other words, you talked about taking out a bridge.
Yeah.
How do people flow through that? Because you have a railway track, so how do I move north-south?
So part of that is the study is figuring that out. So obviously you have your Simcoe Street Bridge and your Richmond Street Bridge. As part of the design and development of the GO station, our understanding is the Michael Stark Trail will have a pedestrian crossing of sorts. And then this study will look at, as I say, potentially alternatives like a new Albert Street Bridge or a new facility of sorts that maybe is needed to support the development densities that are being considered.
So you're talking a new Albert Street Bridge, is that people, is that cars?
Could be one, could be both. Could be
anything going underneath the train tracks, for example?
Could be. Typically tunneling is more expensive than bridges. So
we also have Canadian winters.
We do.
One of the things that I always find with the city is they put in a lot of development before they think of they're probably thinking, but they don't get there. So you put a lot of development up north, the housing, and then you think about widening the streets below, because all the traffic, including this traffic here, is going to go on the 401. So you have Simcoe Street, you have Richmond Road. Those are not good exits.
And MTL is looking at changing Simcoe Street's exit to be both directions on off. They've started. That's the Albert Street. Yeah, that is different.
Yeah,
right?
so what you see or the notices you've probably heard about is the replacement for the Simcoe Bridge and the Albert Bridge over 401. The actual interchange work is still in the works with MTO. We don't know the
They
timeline.
said they were supposed to start it in the beginning of spring of 2020.
Further to his question, Noah, you have the
Okay.
Ritson and the but you have the Ritson and the Simcoe. One of those is gonna be shut down when they do that interchange.
Right.
So all of a sudden, you just got one of those roads instead of two.
Again, we understand that as part of construction, you can't have the same level of service as before. So we have to work through that pain to get to a better
Final condition,
Yeah.
But you guys don't live here, so you're not working through the pain. It's the people that live here that are under construction for the next 40 years, right?
Definitely. Again, it's not, you can't build something without having to have construction. Construction is.
No, but the area you're talking about constructing and having major construction in this area houses the oldest homes in Oshawa. So you're disturbing the ground. When you've got houses that have been there for 130 years, you're gonna have an engineer come to every one of our homes and do an inspection before you start doing all of this stuff?
Well, what I can tell you is as part of any construction, noise and vibration is one of the studies that has to be done to verify what the impacts of that construction has on the surrounding area.
Okay, so I just had them dig up the front of my house, as you know, Rajiv, for the new water main. Okay, the only houses they investigated, they did engineering studies on, were the two houses on the corner. And when I looked at the plan, they weren't supposed to be driving their backhoes down my street this way. That's why my house wasn't investigated. Yet every time I left my driveway and I come back, that backhoe's parked 5 feet from my front door.
And again, if that's what, you should talk to the.
I've already talked to them. We don't even have a grass
Sorry.
back. We don't even have our trees.
Sorry, I'm just gonna interject. I understand your concern. Those concerns, I encourage you to speak to city staff about. We're on topic on kind of what we're here tonight about. I want to just be respectful, 9:05. Are there any final questions before we wrap up? As I said, please, on your way out, take a look. We've got contact information for Connor and Ranjit, for myself and Giannis. All of us are available to speak with you at any time. There is our project website. As we said, the recording for tonight will be posted there. All of the boards from tonight are there. The digital version of the survey you have are there. We encourage you to continue to participate. We thank you for coming out tonight. And as I said, we are at perhaps the midpoint and probably not even there for this study. We have a lot of work to do, and we really hope that you all continue to participate with us through the next year as we look to finalize this study. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and have a good rest of your evening. It's
Thank you.